Imagine collapse not as a sudden explosion, but as a silent, spreading crack that begins deep within the system, like a hairline fracture in a dam, invisible at first, but growing until the entire structure fails. What if the end does not announce itself with fire and thunder, but arrives quietly, through failures in leadership, faltering supply lines, and the invisible erosion of morale? History is filled with examples. The fall of Constantinople in the 15th century did not come from a single, overwhelming assault, but from years of fraying alliances and internal decay. The Roman Empire, too, crumbled not in a single night, but over generations, weakened by internal strife and administrative collapse long before the barbarians breached its gates. When most people picture war, they see front lines ablaze, soldiers exchanging fire, territory won and lost by the hour. They imagine dramatic charges, tanks thundering forward, and the roar of artillery echoing across shattered landscapes. But what if the true breaking point is hidden, unfolding in back rooms and command posts, far from the cameras and the maps? Consider the Vietnam War. While the world watched iconic battles like Khe Sanh and Hue, it was the steady erosion of will and logistical exhaustion behind the scenes that ultimately forced a superpower to withdraw. The drama on the map was only the surface of a deeper struggle. Take Pokrovsk. Just yesterday, its defenses seemed solid, almost legendary in their resilience, like the fortress cities of Verdun or Stalingrad, which once held back massive offensives through sheer tenacity. Yet in less than a single day, what started as a minor clash escalated into a full-scale rout. By nightfall, the lines had not just bent, they had shattered. The speed of this collapse was not merely surprising, it was unprecedented in recent memory. For context, even in the swiftest advances of the Second World War, such as the German blitzkrieg through France, entire fronts took days or weeks to crumble, not hours. This is not mere speculation or propaganda. Across the spectrum, from Ukrainian insiders to Western intelligence sources, there is now rare agreement. Something fundamental has changed. Both public and private voices are warning that this moment could reshape the entire war. Similar warnings echoed during historic turning points, like the fall of Saigon or the encirclement at Stalingrad, where insiders knew the implications before the world caught up. Here lies the real risk for those watching from afar. If you only track who holds which village, if you judge by daily advances or retreats, you are missing the invisible engines that drive victory or defeat. Wars are not won by maps alone. They turn on what happens behind the scenes. When trust cracks, when logistics fail, when resolve begins to slip away. In the First World War, for example, months of trench warfare masked the critical importance of supply convoys and morale on the home front, which ultimately determined which side could sustain the fight. So, what truly determines a war's outcome? Is it raw courage, brilliant tactics, or the slow unraveling of the support structure beneath? To understand why Pokrovsk fell, and why it matters beyond one town, we need to look beneath the surface, at both the tactical chessboard and the deeper currents shaping this conflict. Just as the fall of Singapore in the Second World War was not solely about battlefield losses, but about the collapse of British command, so too does Pokrovsk's story extend far beyond its city limits. The rapid fall of Pokrovsk was not just a battlefield surprise, it was a sign of profound systemic stress. Understanding the sequence of events and the tactics used will reveal how this moment could echo far beyond the region. The consequences can be as cascading as the domino theory feared during the Cold War. One city falls, and the shockwaves destabilize entire regions. How does a fortress turn into a death trap almost overnight? That is the question now haunting Ukraine after the sudden, near-total collapse of defenses around Pokrovsk. Only yesterday, the city appeared secure, a bulwark in the east. Today, it is a gaping wound, ensnaring the very soldiers who once trusted its walls. Like the defenders of Dien Bien Phu in Indochina, Ukrainian troops found themselves surrounded, their hopes for relief dashed by the speed and surprise of the enemy advance. This disaster did not follow the old script of urban warfare. Russian commanders abandoned slow, attritional assaults and instead unleashed a new kind of blitz. Armored spearheads tore past outer trenches, driving deep into the city's core. The blow fell hardest at Pokrovsk's central railway station, the linchpin of Ukrainian logistics in this sector. Historically, control of transportation hubs has often decided the fate of campaigns. The capture of railway junctions in the American Civil War, for example, routinely sealed the fate of entire armies. Capturing that station did more than sever a rail line. It shattered Ukraine's entire local command and control, plunging defenders into disarray. Cut off from reinforcements and supplies, Ukrainian units began to withdraw in confusion, their lines unraveling street by street. Isolated squads, once part of a unified defense, turned into scattered pockets fighting for survival. The panic spread like wildfire, each defeat amplifying the next. Such domino collapses have been seen before, from the French retreat at Sedan in the Franco-Prussian War to the German withdrawal across the Eastern Front in 1944. Pokrovsk is not just another city on a map. It guards the principal corridors into central Donbass, the very arteries through which Ukraine moves troops, weapons, and food. Losing it hands Russia a clear route toward the heart of the East. The risk is not contained. If this front collapses, adjacent regions could fall in rapid order, leaving Ukraine scrambling to patch holes faster than they open. This echoes the fall of Manila in the Second World War, where the loss of a critical city opened the way to the heart of the Philippines. The stakes for Ukraine are nothing short of existential. Pokrovsk's fall is more than a tactical defeat. It threatens the cohesion of Ukraine's entire war effort. If Russia repeats this maneuver elsewhere, Ukrainian strongholds could find themselves encircled and isolated before any meaningful response. Every node lost multiplies logistical nightmares, saps morale, and strains already fraying chains of command. Similar patterns were seen in the closing months of the Russian Civil War, as one loss after another rapidly eroded the White Army's ability to resist. Yet this is not only a story about tanks and trenches. The roots of this crisis reach deep into Ukraine's rear, exposing cracks in leadership, supplies, and communication. Pokrovsk is both a symptom and a warning. The battlefield is shaped as much by unseen failures as by visible blows. In the Falklands War, for instance, logistical missteps and intelligence failures shaped the outcome as much as valor on the field. But how did such a pivotal stronghold become so vulnerable? And why did Ukrainian leadership miss the warning signs? The answers lie in pressure points far from the front, where decisions, delays, and doubts quietly set the stage for disaster. In history, such as the winter of 1740 in Prussia, poor supply and indecisive leadership turned potential victories into humiliating defeats. What happens when command falters and soldiers lose faith? The psychological dimension of war is often overlooked, but the collapse of morale has ended more campaigns than any number of casualties. Consider the mutinies in the French army in 1917, or even the disintegration of the Imperial Russian army in 1917, when soldiers simply walked away from the trenches. Beneath the sudden collapse at Pokrovsk lies a deeper, more insidious crisis. This is not just a battlefield defeat. It is a fracture in Ukraine's war effort, threatening the nation's ability to resist. Ukrainian commanders were blindsided by Russia's new playbook: lightning advances, unpredictable thrusts, and steady, grinding pressure that cracked open even their strongest defensive lines. This adaptation is reminiscent of the German use of stormtrooper tactics in the final months of the First World War, designed specifically to shatter static defenses. In the chaos that followed, reserves were scrambled from every direction. This desperate reshuffling left other sectors, Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk, and Donetsk, dangerously exposed, multiplying vulnerabilities far faster than solutions could be found. Every patch created a new tear. The crisis was no longer contained. It was spreading like wildfire. In military history, this is called the crisis of the reserves, when every contingency is spent and no fresh forces remain for new emergencies. On the front, the consequences became immediate and brutal. Morale among Ukrainian troops has plunged. Eyewitnesses describe confusion, abandoned trenches, and a growing fear that the situation is spinning out of control. Casualties mount. But more alarming still is the surge in desertions. Where defiance once unified the ranks, now only uncertainty remains. Soldiers ask, who leads? What is the plan? Is survival even possible? The echoes of this can be heard in the British Expeditionary Force's retreat to Dunkirk, where confusion and despair nearly doomed the evacuation. This leadership vacuum is most crushing for Ukraine's newest recruits. Many have only days or weeks of training before being rushed into battle. Lacking equipment, clear orders, or even reliable support, these men and women are not met with scenes of heroism, but with chaos and dread. The front line becomes a place to survive, not to fight. The Soviet Union faced similar dilemmas in 1941, when raw conscripts were sent to the front with minimal preparation, often with disastrous results. Analyst estimates suggest the scale of the exodus is unprecedented. Tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, have deserted or disappeared. An exodus that threatens to hollow out Ukraine's armed forces at the worst possible moment. Every lost soldier weakens not just defenses, but the fragile system holding the military together. The mass desertions of the Austro-Hungarian army in 1918 show how quickly an army can melt away when faith in victory vanishes. The truth is stark. Without unity and trust, even the best supplied army can unravel. When belief in leadership dies, command collapses, and the survival of the nation hangs by a thread. The fate of Napoleon's Grand Army in Russia, which disintegrated not only from enemy action, but from desertion and starvation, is a sobering testament. As Ukraine's crisis deepens, the international landscape shifts as well, threatening to leave Kyiv more isolated than ever. The diplomatic arena, always unpredictable, can transform rapidly in times of crisis. The fate of Czechoslovakia in 1938 is a cautionary tale. Abandoned by allies, its resistance collapsed overnight. With the home front in turmoil, Ukraine's diplomatic standing faces new and dangerous tests. The world is watching, some with sympathy, others with calculation. Major powers often weigh their interests above promises. History is full of alliances broken under pressure, as seen in the collapse of the League of Nations before the Second World War. When support evaporates and new technologies rewrite the rules, what remains to fight with? For President Zelensky, the long-awaited meeting with Donald Trump delivers only bitter disappointment. The message from Washington is unmistakable. United States backing is no longer assured. The era of open-ended Western aid is ending, leaving Ukraine exposed at its most vulnerable moment. The sudden withdrawal of support recalls the fate of South Vietnam in 1975, when promised aid dried up in its hour of need. Across Europe and North America, former allies now urge Kyiv to negotiate peace rather than pledge fresh assistance. These calls cut at the heart of Ukraine's strategy, shattering hopes for a decisive military breakthrough. The diplomatic landscape is shifting underfoot, and Ukraine's leverage is slipping away day by day. The Munich Agreement of 1938 offers a haunting parallel, where diplomatic isolation forced one nation to make impossible choices. On the ground, Russia is quick to exploit every weakness. In the east, Russian forces push forward not only near Pokrovsk, but also in Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk. Ukrainian defenses are stretched thin, forced to cover an ever-expanding front. But Russia's campaign is evolving beyond territory. The technological war is escalating rapidly. The use of advanced drones and precision-guided bombs echoes the revolution in military affairs seen in the Gulf War, where technology reshaped the battlefield overnight. Moscow unleashes waves of long-range guided bombs and drones, striking deep into Ukrainian supply hubs far from the fighting. These attacks cripple logistics, snarl troop movements, and force Ukraine to spread its defenses across hundreds of kilometers. The result: Ukraine's ability to reinforce and resupply is being systematically dismantled. In World War II, similar strategies were used by both the Allies and Axis to cut supply lines and isolate enemy strongpoints. Now, Russia turns its sights on energy infrastructure. Strikes on gas plants and pipelines risk plunging entire cities into darkness and cold as winter looms. Millions of civilians face the threat of blackouts, with hospitals and homes increasingly exposed to catastrophic outages. The humanitarian risks are mounting rapidly. The siege of Leningrad is a powerful historical reminder of how attacks on infrastructure can turn war zones into humanitarian disasters. The danger is stark. Losing both diplomatic support and technological parity could turn setbacks into irreversible disaster. The consequences would ripple far beyond Ukraine's borders, threatening European stability and the global order. Each lost advantage intensifies the pressure on Ukraine's leaders, soldiers, and citizens, and on a world looking on, uncertain and anxious. The domino effect of the Balkan crises in the early 20th century shows how rapidly local conflicts can escalate into wider catastrophes. These converging crises are forging a new, far harsher reality for the war, one where every decision and every loss carries heightened stakes. The lessons of history are clear. When multiple lines of defense, military, diplomatic, and economic, are breached at once, recovery becomes exponentially harder. But in Kiev's corridors of power, the search for answers is already underway. What choices remain when every path seems fraught with peril? Decision-makers must weigh risks with unprecedented care, knowing that missteps now carry consequences for generations. Is it ever possible to win a war by merely reacting, or does true victory demand planning far ahead? The past 24 hours near Pokrovsk force us to confront this dilemma, and the answer reaches far beyond the battlefield. The wisdom of ancient strategists like Sun Tzu, who warned that every battle is won before it is fought, seems more relevant than ever. Modern warfare is no longer just a struggle of numbers or moments of valor. Today, the balance tilts toward those with deeper logistics, unwavering morale, and the ability to adapt faster than their adversaries. The collapse of Ukrainian defenses did not happen in a single dramatic clash. Instead, it was the slow unraveling of supply chains, the grinding down of reserves, and the mounting weight of psychological exhaustion that opened the gates to disaster. The American defeat in Korea at the Chosin Reservoir followed a similar pattern, a crisis of supply and morale as much as one of tactics. When strategy gives way to improvisation, even the bravest stand little chance. In Pokrovsk, defenders were left grasping for responses, always reacting, never dictating the pace. This was not just a tactical failure, but a strategic one, a reminder that wars are often decided not on the front lines, but in the quiet of planning rooms and the bustle of supply depots. The lessons of the Yom Kippur War, where surprise and logistics determine the outcome, echo here. Technology and diplomacy can shift the balance in the blink of an eye. A single advanced weapon system or an unexpected change in foreign support can erase months of sacrifice and hard-won ground. In this conflict, Russian forces leveraged new tactics and sudden diplomatic openings, catching their opponents unprepared and off balance. The introduction of the tank in World War I, or of jet aircraft in Korea, similarly upended old calculations overnight. Wars of attrition reward not only courage, but also depth of reserves and the ability to endure. When resources vanish and morale fractures, even elite units can break under pressure. The fall of Pokrovsk is a testament. It is endurance and preparation, more than fleeting victories, that ultimately decide a war's outcome. The drawn-out sieges of the Napoleonic Wars, where supply outlasted valor, offer a parallel. Ignoring these lessons is perilous. The same dynamics play out in business, politics, and our own lives. Relying only on quick reactions, without building true resilience or clear strategy, almost always leads to collapse. The financial crisis of 2008 proved that fragility behind the scenes can trigger sudden, system-wide failure. Recognizing the often hidden factors behind each turning point can help us judge risk, credibility, and stability, whether on the world stage or in our most personal decisions. So, what practical steps can be taken to avoid such collapse? First, invest in deep reserves, not only material, but human and psychological. Foster unity of command and clarity of mission. Regular, honest assessments of weaknesses prevent small cracks from becoming fatal. In the corporate world, this means building robust supply chains and clear leadership succession plans. In personal life, it means preparing for adversity and nurturing trusted support networks. Second, develop early warning systems for morale and logistics. History shows that collapses rarely come without warning. The fall of the Soviet Union was preceded by years of economic stagnation and declining public trust, visible to those who looked closely. Organizations and nations alike should cultivate channels for honest feedback and rapid adaptation. Third, maintain diplomatic flexibility. Rigid alliances and inflexible doctrines leave little room for maneuver when circumstances shift. The survival of Britain during the Second World War owed much to its ability to build new alliances and adapt strategies as fortunes changed. Fourth, never underestimate the importance of communication. In Pokrovsk, the loss of command and control doomed defenders to chaos. Clear lines of communication, within armies, companies, or families, are the backbone of resilience. As the dust settles, what practical lessons should we carry forward? And how can we learn to spot the quiet signals of coming collapse or opportunity before they become glaringly obvious to everyone else? The answer lies in vigilance, adaptability, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths before they spiral out of control. The true outcome of war is often decided long before the first shot is fired, or quietly lost behind closed doors. What has unfolded around Pokrovsk is not just the collapse of defensive lines. It is the disintegration of an entire system, ripped apart by failures in leadership, logistics, and strategic vision. The rapid developments of the past 24 hours have laid bare a hard truth. Brute force on the battlefield is only one small part of modern conflict. The most critical battles are fought far from the front. Quiet negotiations, missed supply runs, late-night phone calls, and shifting alliances all shape the fate of armies before soldiers ever meet. What happened in Pokrovsk is the visible result of invisible failures and unseen decisions, stacking up day after day, hidden from the public eye. This is a pattern that repeats across history, from the fall of Carthage to the collapse of the Soviet bloc. For Ukraine, the crisis runs deeper than territory lost. Exhaustion gnaws at troops retreating through mud and rain. Command structures crack. Diplomatic support from abroad grows ever more uncertain. Meanwhile, Russia's new tactics, rapid armored advances, unpredictable attacks, relentless logistical pressure, have widened these fractures, pushing the situation to the edge. The lesson is clear. Adaptability and preparation are the only true security. Viewers may think they understand war by watching explosions and maps on a screen. But the real story is written in planning rooms, supply depots, and the ability to adapt under pressure. Turning points are forged away from gunfire, in choices that may never make headlines. The fog of war conceals the true drivers of fate until it is too late to change course. Judging events only by what is seen risks missing the true stakes. The fall of Pokrovsk is a warning. The world's gravest dangers often arrive not with noise and fire, but with silent failures of organization, leadership, and trust. This lesson matters for generals and politicians, but also for anyone hoping to navigate a world where sudden crises can shatter security, investments, and futures in a single night. The collapse of Lehman Brothers, the fall of Enron, the surprise upsets in elections, all serve as reminders that the unseen often shapes the visible. So the next time you watch frontlines shift or markets tremble, ask, what hidden decisions, broken alliances, or overlooked flaws lie beneath the chaos? Because, whether on a battlefield or in a boardroom, the fate of the world is almost always decided before the first bullet flies. The key is to look deeper, question assumptions, and never mistake surface calm for true stability. In the end, the fate of Pokrovsk is more than a military episode. It is a masterclass in the silent, systemic forces that shape victory and defeat. By learning to read between the lines, To track both the visible and the invisible, we can better prepare for whatever comes next, in war, in peace, and in our own uncertain futures.